Welcome to Bolivia Political Crossroads, episode number 53 today in English.
Wow.
Good morning. Yeah, 53.
That's a lot. That is a lot.
We're getting there.
Well, good morning, Paul.
Morning, Ernesto. Pleasure to be back here with you. And
Same here. I'm very happy.
enjoying.
For 53rd edition, that's a long ways already. Yep.
Yeah, 53rd. How would you say that? How would you say that in Spanish? They don't use ordinal numbers too much in Spanish, do they?
No, it's
they would say
quincuagésimo.
Quincuagésimo tercero.
Quincuagésimo tercero, sí.
No wonder why.
Too much.
No wonder why they don't use it.
Because they don't know the word. Yeah. And if they would say something, I bet the press would say 53 edición, 53ª edición. That's what they would say now. Modern times.
53
the real Spanish is
53.
Yeah, that's what they would say. I'm pretty sure.
Like onceavo, doceavo, right? They do that a lot.
Exactly, yes. Yeah, but the real Spanish is 53ª edición.
It's an interesting thing to think about, no? How something so simple that you take for granted in one language can be so complicated in another.
Oh yeah.
But anyway.
No, this is true. Yeah.
And I wonder why it's not common, right? I mean, if you want to use those kinds of terms or the ordinal numbers, people might look at you like, what's this guy trying to show he's smart or something?
That's true, yeah.
I don't know if it's a matter of laziness on a level of the public and private education sector, or I don't know, culturally, maybe it's just not important. I don't know, who knows? Anyway.
Well, if we now that we touch it, the point you're making is very, very interesting, because in my educational experience, I find that the dictionary is very, very common resource in American education. It's not a very common resource in Bolivian education. I don't know about Latin America, and I guess it's the same as in Bolivia. It's not. In fact, it's, I'm going to exaggerate a little bit. It's not, if you look at the dictionary all the time, or you say, hey, what's the dictionary say? They'll make a comment, or they'll think that you do not have a good grasp of the language. So,
you need to look at a dictionary. You know what that means? You're dumb.
He's so dumb. He's so dumb. He has to look at the dictionary. While in the Anglo culture, it's exactly the reverse. If you look at the dictionary and say, wow, this guy is really learned. He wants to express himself appropriately, so he looked at the dictionary. So it's a plus. In the Latin world, it's a minus. He doesn't know what he's talking about. That's why he has to go to the dictionary. I can speak without the dictionary. The end result is they don't know how to say quincuagésimo 50 years ago. That's it, really, that is it. Yeah.
It's an interesting observation.
Yeah, education has it's so different aspects, but it's interesting. Yeah, I find that learning in one and the other system has made me get interesting aspects of education in both systems, because both are very interesting, very different, very different, but very interesting in both sides. Yeah. Well,
right. Are we ready to get started?
Yeah, let's go to politics.
So there's all kinds of stuff going on, as usual, in terms of politics. Coronavirus has taken a sidestep, perhaps a little bit, in terms of this second wave. Seems to be going down. We seem to have gotten past the crest of the wave, if you will. Although yesterday the official numbers are pretty high. Over 1,000 cases total, and 400 some in Santa Cruz. 200.
But the carnival lockdown has contributed to this, right?
Contributed to the numbers going down? Well, I think it's too soon to tell. because a couple of things. I mean, when you get tested, I think they're still basing the official numbers on the PCR test results, and the PCR test results take a couple of days, generally.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Uh-huh.
And I don't think they're using the and how do you say antígeno nasal test? They're using them, but they aren't using them to calculate official numbers, as far as I know. And generally, symptoms don't show up for about 5 days, anywhere from 5 days to 2 weeks, right? Well, let's just say 5 days. So if Carnival basically started, a week ago, Saturday, Sunday, and then people started getting tested, if somebody has symptoms, they're going to feel them 5 days later, let's say on Friday, and then they get their results on Saturday or Sunday. So we should know, I guess, within the next, I don't know, 3 or 4 days, let's say, if the Carnival lockdown, for those that aren't here and don't know, in Santa Cruz, we had this major lockdown, the most strict we've had since this whole thing got started back in March of last year. And in Santa Cruz, no? In the other cities, they didn't do this.
No, they didn't. Only here.
So here you couldn't go out. You weren't supposed to go out. You couldn't drive your cars. There was no public transportation. Everything was closed. The markets and the supermarkets were supposed to be closed, but then they changed it so you could be open until noon. But it was very quiet. We stayed at our pizza place in the city on Alemana, which is a major avenue, and it was very, 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 very quiet. It was just like being back in, let's say, back in May, or that time of the year when nobody could be out on the streets driving. But anyway, so I guess we'll see. People were gathering. There's a little Bendita, a little neighborhood store next door to our house, and people were pulling up and putting 2 or 3 cases of beer in the back of their car. And I don't want to get those people in trouble. They weren't supposed to be selling beer. Good thing we're doing this in English. But I'll have to edit that later. Break my rules of not editing. Or censoring. But we'll see, because people were still getting together, but they were doing it on the down low, right? It was not so, they weren't making it obvious. So, but I don't think it's going to be like it was after Christmas and New Year's, and with the big, huge end of the year graduation parties for schools where there were hundreds of people in attendance. I can't see a third wave, coming on after this, because at least from what I could see here in Santa Cruz, I can't speak for the other cities. It did seem that people in general were following the rules. So I guess we'll see. We'll see. That being said, I guess this is a good segue into talking about this sanitary emergency law that's been passed.
Okay.
If you want to start there, that's a hot topic right now. Basically, because either since today, I believe the medical sector is basically on strike, because what is this Arce that was passed by Marxista legislature, that basically all decision making in terms of budgeting and equipment and hiring needs to be made on a central level by the central government, basically taking away powers from local, city, and municipal and departmental governments. And from what I understand, the committee there's like a central planning committee that they've created, which is composed of people who are not medical experts, or doesn't even include any people who are medical experts in the central planning committee. So that's an issue. That's an issue that has a lot of people in the medical field up in arms. It prohibits medical workers from protesting. So it's a violation of right to protest, free speech. It's unconstitutional, that's for sure. And it also puts price regulations on private clinics, what they can charge for a hospital bed, what they can charge for this and that, whether or not they can charge an upfront, how do you say a garantía or deposito? A deposit, a security deposit. And so those are a few of the things that the points that have the medical doctors and health workers worried and upset. And so basically this has resulted in what is now a general strike in the health sector, with public health facilities basically at a halt, except for the emergency rooms. They are attending ER cases, and also surprisingly, in the private sector, private clinics are also striking and only tending to emergency situations. So yeah, it's definitely an issue, and especially when you've still got tons of, hundreds of people, if not thousands, getting infected with the virus every day, on top of all the other things you've got going on. People still get sick, and people still get run over by cars, and blah, blah, blah. People still have cancer and other chronic diseases. It's extremely unfortunate that the government or the Ministry of Health and the health sector can't come to terms on this. And I wonder, I'm not quite sure what they're trying to achieve by doing this. Arce's administration has been criticized by the opposition and even observed by people within the party for kind of sitting on their hands for the first 3 months they've been in office and not getting much done. And so I have a hard time understanding what they're trying to achieve with this. What's your take?
It's definitely it's a controversial issue because it has become a controversial issue immediately after it was approved. You started speaking about the National Council, the confirmation of the National Council. That National Council is basically represent the people. It has 11 members, and each member represents one ministry. So there's one from the Ministry of the Presidency, one from the Ministry of Health, one from the Ministry of Economics, one from the Ministry of Government, one from the Ministry of Defense, one from the Ministry of Justice, another one from Planification, and so on and so forth. To me, it seems reasonable, technically speaking, because you don't need a council of only doctors. You need to see the whole problem in the whole nation.
Sure.
Not only in terms of health, in terms
only
of
doctors.
Resources
And logistics and planning.
Yeah, it's basically because see what's happening in other countries, not just in Bolivia. Right now the vaccine is available. Well, not enough, but it's available. But one of the problems that they have in countries is that they cannot take it from one point to the other because there are logistical problems on the cold chain, on basic transportation. It's a hassle everywhere. I cannot enumerate the problems that the logistics have, but I just can say one or two or three problems. But basically, that is a problem in Peru. That's a problem in Brazil. That's a problem in the United States, and that there is not enough of the vaccine. That's a definite problem everywhere in the world. So, the way they confront this National Council, to me, it's not bad because all these ministries have to be there, watching the development of the crisis and trying to understand the different angles of the crisis. So, okay.
But what I don't get, why in doing so are they taking away competencies of local government?
That's the point. Yeah, that is the point.
You can't put everybody into the same basket with this. And also, it's also, again, I'm not, I can't talk too much about the laws here, but there's certain issues where they're stepping on toes they shouldn't be stepping on and taking away.
For example, if you have 500,000 vaccines, how do you distribute them in the country? You need a centralized entity that does this, because if you only go by the autonomy structure of mind, then you're over, because how are you going to allot Santa Cruz? How are you going to allot La Paz? How are you going to allot Beni? there has to be a centralized institution that establishes the number of vaccines that will go to La Paz, that will go to Santa Cruz and to El Beni.
Only if the central government is in charge of purchasing those, right? Because if the municipality of Santa Cruz goes and gets their own vaccines, then I don't see what the point is there. And then you're dealing with, is there a national registry? Is there a local registry? Or you have to cross-reference?
But see, it's still relevant because I'll just give you the extreme example, you know. What if the municipality of Santa Cruz has the money and they purchase all the vaccines needed in Santa Cruz? Then then the central government has to take the decision that there are enough vaccines in Santa Cruz, and the central government does not have to send any one more vaccine to Santa Cruz. That has to be a decision from a central institution, definitely. Whether it is a planification institution, nothing else. It allots the resources, scarce resources, in the 9 departments, but somebody has to do it. And like you say, if there's a department that buys all the vaccines, then forget, you know, you just put a cross to that state or to that department, and you just play with the other 8 departments. But somebody has to take the decision, central decision. Santa Cruz cannot buy all the vaccines and ask for more vaccines to the central government. That has no purpose, you know.
Right.
So I just see that. I understand the claim, but I also see the necessity of having a central institution, a planification of the distribution of scarce resources throughout the country. Nobody can do that other than the government, and the government has the obligation to do that. I don't know, I just see it that way.
Yeah, well, that's just one of the points. I mean, talking about going in regards to the vaccines, you look at, you know, again, I think it's something that the local governments should be able to take care of on their own. I mean, you've got, you know, now that we're in weeks away from the local elections, suddenly the municipal government here in Santa Cruz has created this central registry where you can register online, so that when they have the vaccines, I think they said they're purchasing 600,000, which is a significant number for a population of about
3 million.
Yeah. Well, the municipality is somewhere around 1.7 or 1.8, something like that. But anyway,
okay.
It's enough for, if everybody needs 2 doses, then that's enough for about 20%, 18% of the population. It's a good start, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But the point being is, you know, these are things that they can and should be taken care of. I don't want to say on their own, as if they're abandoned in the central government can't do anything, but I mean, they should be doing things, you know, on their own to take care of this. I'm not saying that I don't see what the point is. At a central level, there should be obviously coordination and planification, but it's also a concern when publicly, you know, the authorities at a national level are saying things in election times that, oh, mayors and governors that are elected that aren't masistas, well, be careful that we aren't going to be able to, you know, if you elect non-masista authorities for your city or for your state or department, then, well, it's going to be harder to coordinate with them. It's basically a, you know, blackmail, I mean, right? They need to do a better job at communicating, not creating friction and confrontation, because if they want to say, oh, we need the central planning committee, but at the same time during elections, we're not going to coordinate with non-masista officials or authorities, then, you know, what kind of message are they sending out?
No, pretty bad one. No question about that. Yeah. But just looking at the law, you know, I'm looking right now at the point of our discussion.
Mm-hmm.
The law does not establish directly that they are taking away the competencies of the roles of the autonomies of the governments of the states or the departments of the government of the city. It doesn't say that. What it says is exactly what it has to say. It says that the title of the article is Article 22, says excepcionalidad en el ejercicio de competencias. That means there's an exception approved in this law in the exercise of of your roles. So it says that whenever it is detected that either a municipality or a departmental government does not have the means to bring a solution to a problem regarding this issue of the coronavirus
Then they step in.
pandemic, then they step in. That's exactly what the article says. And I think that this article, as is expressed now, is logical, because what else do you expect people to do? I mean, somebody has to take care of the people in the municipality of Cotoca. If they don't have the money, the resources and stuff, who's going to take care of that? So that's the moment when the central government intervenes and says, hey, I have Article 22. On the basis of this article, I can step in and take charge of this. So the writing of it, I don't see it at all bad. I think that the form it is expressed in the law is very rational. I see your point. Your point is a political point. And in practice, it's a whole different world. But the law itself is conceived, in my opinion, basically, it says what it has to say, I think, because these are emergency moments. Nobody can come out with the banner of, hey, we're autonomous, please don't come in. We're going to die because we're autonomous. No, you can't let your people die because of autonomy. If there's a central authority that can take care of things, then let it step in. Yeah.
But it doesn't
That's basically
it doesn't supersede or suppress, I guess, the competencies at a local level.
no, not automatically. It's an exceptional rule. It's whenever you can't do it yourself, I'll step in. It's like a father, you know. If you cannot do your homework because you're sick, I'll do it for you. You know, well, that's not a good example because you shouldn't do your kids' homework, but that's the idea. You know, if you can't do it, I'll do it for you. You know, that's what is expressed here in that Article 22. The reason I bring it up is because a lot of the fighting that take place within the country now is just merely political. You know, it's almost everything is political because people don't take the time to read the law. It's just we have to be against it because we're in the opposition, you know, and we have to favor it because we're Marxistas and this is a good law. That's why our purpose of being here is exactly that, right? It's exactly to just try to see where the right the point of equilibrium is, you know, and in this case, in that specific issue, I don't think this law is necessarily bad because it steps into the competencies of the autonomous regions, such as the municipalities and the gobernaciones. It's well expressed. It will do it. It will do it in case they have to do it. I don't know. That's the point that I just wanted to make because I'm looking at the law right now, and yeah, it's not a long law, but it's interesting. And in both points that we just mentioned, in the Consejo, which is comprised of the ministries, and in the stepping into the autonomous functions, I necessarily don't see anything pretty bad. The thing that really annoyed me, because I read it on the news, like you mentioned it before, is the part of the obligation of the clinics of the private hospitals, right, to price regulations. And I read it. I didn't read it in the law yet. I'll try to look at it right now. That they are not. They cannot ask for a guarantee. If you are a person that goes into a private hospital and say, "I need to be helped here," and they'll ask you, "Do you have money?" And say, "No, I don't have money."
You have to put in a security deposit.
Yeah, that can really blow a hospital up because, yes, I understand the humanitarian part of it, but the real part of it is you need to make money in a hospital in order for the hospital to keep on going. And if you have, I don't know, 20 patients that go in and they don't pay the bill, and you're full of patients that are not paying the bill, then your hospital will go down the drain. And yeah, that's terrible. I see that in economic terms, this is terrible because who's going to pay the bill? I remember in 1975, the first book I read about economics was a funny book. The title of it, "There Ain't Such a Thing as a Free Lunch." You know, that was my first economics book, and that is true. You know, somebody pays the bill on the some way along the line. Somebody's paying the bill, and in this case, if nobody's going to pay the bill of the hospital, of the private hospital is going to die, and if the private hospital dies, we are paying the bill with our health, because there is not going to be that service anymore. So, I don't know, this is a real problem. I see that the protest in those terms, I think that it has a validity. They cannot, unless the government is willing to pay the bill, unless the government says, okay, you know, yeah, but then we're all paying the bill, because it's with our money, because the government is not paying that money with Lucho Arce's pocket money. It's going to be paid with our taxes money. So it's a big debate, and I think that economically speaking, that is probably the crux of this debate, because it was spoken before. I don't know if you remember when Janine was president, this issue was on the table, and we spoke about that in one of our programs, because it was in, I don't know, it wasn't in the whole Great Britain. I think it was, I don't know if it was in England or in Scotland. They did it. They did exactly this, you know, not the guarantee part, but they obligated the private hospitals to open the doors to anybody that would knock the door, and that was that's terrible, because then you have all these bills that are just going around. It's a big discussion, you know. It's a big discussion, and I don't know how it ended up in that part of the UK, but it was done. It was done then. And the discussion came to Bolivia. We discussed about this, I think, in the program, but it was discussed in the whole country. And nobody ever touched the private hospitals. Now they're touching them, and they're touching them in where it hurts, which is the money, the pocket money of the clinics. And if much of this takes place, many of the clinics are not necessarily rich clinics. You know, many of the clinics are, yeah, they just make sufficient money to survive. So if you have, I don't know, 10, 20 patients that are paying the bill, then that's it. You know, you're not going to be able to pay the rent. You're going to be able to pay the salaries of people that work there. So it becomes a hassle for them. I don't know.
You also consider, well, I agree with you. It's a major concern. And I'm not sure if it's the right thing to do. I don't think it is. You know, you can't be messing with the private sector. The clinics also, out of all the different types of businesses that are operating right now, I hazard a guess that the ones that are incurring the highest increase in operating costs due to the pandemic are the clinics and hospitals, for a bunch of reasons. They need to buy more biosecurity suits and I don't know, the disinfectant and stuff, but I mean, probably more gloves, masks, or specialized types of equipment to assure or try to avoid getting infected. They're all getting sick. So you've got people that get sick, you still have to pay them. And at the same time, have somebody else come in and, you know, basically substitute and pay that person. Because if you don't have people working, then, which is, you know, there's no question that in the medical field, that those that are at the high risk of getting coronavirus are those that work in clinics and hospitals, right? You know, in a restaurant or in a department store or in the hardware store, it's not such an issue. And so they're incurring that cost. I'm pretty darn sure, I can't say this based on any investigations I've done, but I can only imagine Bolivia is the country of red tape, that the Ministry of Health or SEDES or whatever authorities are regulating safety standards at the clinics and hospitals are obligating them to fill all kinds of special trámites or paperwork to show that they're completing with these guidelines and et cetera. Again, I haven't investigated that, but I can only imagine And so that's also, extra administrative costs. What I'm getting at is that at the same time, clinics and hospitals have patients left and right because of coronavirus, but also they're incurring, that they're dealing with higher operating costs because of what I just mentioned. And, regulating, putting price ceilings and say you can't charge more than this, or if you can't charge more than that, you can't ask for a security deposit. I don't think it's the right thing to do. And I think it's a cheap way of avoiding responsibility on part of the central government, because the public health system simply can't deal with it. And it's not fair. Life isn't fair, but it has potentially serious and dangerous consequences.
Mhm.
It's the same thing with this. You could make a comparison to the education system right now with the public and private schools. That if the government steps in and tells the private schools that they can't charge this, they can't charge that, and obligate the private schools to operate a loss, then they're going to start closing. And can the government or can the public schools take on that extra burden? Same thing with the private clinics. If they start closing because they're obligated to operate at a loss, it doesn't sound like it was well thought out.
Yeah, but then again, what if you have a person coming to a private clinic and he's dying in that moment? He can't breathe. And what are you going to tell him? Do you have a guarantee? No, I don't have any.
Happens all the time here in this. Before coronavirus, people get turned away from private clinics all the time.
Yeah, this is true.
For this and for that, somebody's in the middle of a heart attack and they say, no, take him somewhere else. He doesn't have insurance with us, or we don't. Happens all the time. The government would probably be doing itself a huge favor instead of, their ideological diatribe of public, the SUS, the universal health care for everybody, and everybody has rights to, and, putting it on paper and saying it in front of the cameras or in front of the microphones without having a way to really back that up. That's political. And they'd probably be doing themselves a favor if they sat down and figured out a way or a strategy or dedicated part of the budget for public health to covering those situations. Okay, somebody was in a life or death situation and showed up in the emergency room at a private clinic, then there should be a state-funded mechanism in place to assure that that person can receive immediate attention so they don't die, and at the same time that private clinic that was closest to that person's house or wherever they were when they had that medical emergency, assure that they get paid. And if the patient can't pay it, then the government pay. That probably exists in many. I'd imagine it exists in other countries, and it seems like a much easier solution and a much more sensible solution than just arbitrarily saying, oh, you can only charge this much and da 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 da. When it's really jeopardizing the clinics and putting them at a risk.
You can't let the clinics die. That's for certain. Yeah, I agree with that. So this is a very delicate issue on this law, and I agree with the point that it's a bad article. It has to be erased or worked out in some manner that it's more rational for the clinics in order to survive, and for the patients in order to get some kind of care if they have an emergency. As you said, it's normal in Bolivia. If a poor guy goes to a clinic and doesn't have money, they will shut the door. Yeah. But it's different now because we have a pandemic and there are thousands of people getting this virus and many people dying, thousands of people dying. Mm-hmm. So it has made more acute the problem. There existed the problem. It wasn't too acute because people really had the choice. Not a great choice of going to a state hospital, but it was there, But now you don't have anything, If you go to a private clinic, they'll shut the door in your face. But then where do you go? If you go to this was an issue last night in a TV program in La Paz, because one of the candidates went to a hospital at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 p.m. Yes, and he filmed the play. He said there's no attention here, and there was no attention there. People were not the doors were closed because it was full of patients. And this is a state place. This is a municipality hospital. You know?
Yeah, just to clarify that, people who don't know, that they closed the doors because they were at capacity. It wasn't because
Right.
it wasn't because they were closed, right? As he
Right.
was saying.
Uh-huh. But still, you know, if you were dying, you couldn't get in there. An inch of your humanity could not get into that hospital, which is also bad because, I don't know, there has to be some mechanism for a government hospital in order to help somebody that is in a very bad situation. They have to have an emergency room 24 hours a day. If they cannot put an additional patient in their clinic, at least they can save them in that immediate moment.
Okay, but now you're being
Save their life.
but you're basing this on what you're saying on what this candidate did. Well, you saw this, right? He blocked off the street so people couldn't come from both ends of the street. He had people that were working with him block the street with their vehicles. So
no, I didn't see that.
Oh, you didn't see this? Yeah. I look. You want me? I'll look for it and bring it up here. Give me just a second here. That's why I say what an asshole. You know, this guy blocked. There's cameras outside, and it shows what happens. And this guy, what's his name? Cesar Duckwater, right?
Duckwater.
He blocked the street from both ends, so vehicles couldn't come or go. It was all set up. It was a fraud. And
I ask you.
Go ahead.
Okay, maybe it was a fraud. I'm not sure.
So he says,
"Oh, this happened for real in Bolivia right now in the pandemic." Don't they close the doors to people even if they're state hospitals?
Can they
do it? They do it all the time.
Here it is. This is it right here. I'm gonna put this up on the.
Okay.
I'm gonna share this here because this is worth looking at. Okay, give me a second here, and I'll gallery view, and we'll share the screen. And here we go. Okay, so I'm going to start this back from the beginning here. So he's the guy here. Here we go.
Yep.
So as you can see, they've already got a car over here on the far end blocking the street. See it?
Okay.
It's actively blocking. And there's Mr. Dockweiler there talking to whoever's standing at the gate's not closed. It's open. There's somebody sitting outside who's probably, their job is to, see why somebody wants to come to the clinic. So there's this car here. And if we continue, here's another one of his guys. And he's filming. And there's people coming and going. He says, "Oh, there's nobody in here. It's closed. This clinic is closed." So, okay, when I say he's blocked the street, at the beginning, they'd blocked the street. But bottom line, this was all staged. This was all staged. This clinic is closed. He was saying it was closed.
Okay.
It was not operating. And you can see people coming and going.
But bottom line, they closed the doors, man. They closed the doors in Santa Cruz.
But I mean, because they can't. But what I was saying before is that if there's an emergency, we're being hypothetical here, and neither of us can know if we're right or not. At that particular clinic, at that particular time, if he wasn't out there doing, staging that, he's just a guy in a shirt and tie, talking to the lady at the front door. And what if an ambulance pulls up or a taxi pulls up with somebody having a heart attack? You don't know if they're going to let that person in or not, right? I mean, it does happen where they don't. It does.
Yeah,
but it's a case. It's case by case, and it depends where.
In Santa Cruz, it happens.
Happens. It happens everywhere.
Yeah, it happens in Santa Cruz. People are not being admitted because there's no space there. And that's just unbelievable. It shouldn't happen. That's the whole point. Whether it's a hospital from the municipality or hospital from the gobernación or the central government, it doesn't have to happen that. They have to imagine some solution to that. Yeah, but interesting discussion. And what Doc Wilder did, whether it was fraudulent or not, he brought a point which is valid. The point is that they're closing the doors of the people. Both the losses in the private hospitals, they close the doors, as you said, they always do it. In the pandemic, they do it for no reason because there's too many people flocking the emergency rooms, and they just close the doors. But also, the state hospitals are closing the doors on the nose of the people because they don't have enough availability of space. So it's a dramatic situation.
Sure it is.
I don't know. It is a dramatic situation.
The last point I want to touch on here with this law before we move on is the prohibition of public protest.
Yeah,
that's the one that blows my mind.
But the first thing that's happening with this law is the first thing that is happening is a public protest.
They're challenging it because that's the one that's unquestionably and indisputably unconstitutional and oppressive. And this again, it's so contradictory to this government. I saw this headline the other day that the word that is most repeated in Luis Arce's speeches since he took office is "gobierno de facto" in reference to Janine Áñez's administration, and it's extremely hypocritical to call them a repressive and dictatorial regime or authoritarian and blah 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 blah, and to prohibit people from peaceful public protest. I mean, that's just it blows my mind. And
no, but it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. The law says prohibición de suspensión de servicios de salud. The prohibition is of the suspension of the health services. And it says, durante el tiempo de vigencia de la declaratoria de emergencia sanitaria.
Suspensiones de servicios.
Claro,
what's one of the most popular forms of protest in Bolivia? Is a paro.
Right.
Is a paro. That's a form of protest.
Yes, but when you're talking about health, you're talking about life. And whether it's the government with the MAS or whatever government there is in Bolivia, you cannot stop health. I think that's a very important point. It's a good discussion with the MAS. This has been a problem. It's always a problem because the health sector, the first thing they do is they stop serving the people. And you're right, they should have the right to protest, and they should have a peaceful protest. But the moment that you're not allowing people to get into a hospital because there's no service there, that's not a peaceful protest. That's a violent protest. You're letting people die because you're not working at that moment. So what's more important, the demand of the workers of the health sector or the life of the people that are sick? It's a complicated issue. It's not a simple issue. Yes. And it's a problem with this law, but it's a historic problem here because one of the most virulent sectors in Bolivia is the health sector. There are two sectors that are very, very aggressive from the social organization. One is the health sector, and the other one is the educational sector. Teachers are extreme leftists. They've always been extreme leftists, and they're being very, very hard on governments. Doctors and nurses are not from the right or the left. They just have a lot of power because when they stop, that's it. People are in serious problems. So yes, this article deserves some debate because I think they should have the right to protest. Yes, I don't think they should have the right to suspend or interrupt health services because they're attempting against the life and the health of people.
Well, again, they are attending to emergency cases. It's like emergency room, life and death situations. So I guess that's how they can get away with I guess beating your argument. if you look at it that way.
But in real life, I don't know if it beats the argument because in a pandemic there are too many of those cases. Maybe in a normal situation, that debate, I don't know if they beat the argument, but maybe it's more arguable. Under a pandemic, that's not an argument, There are too many emergency cases all the time in these times. It's a difficult thing. It should be resolved in court. It'll never be resolved in court because these things are, Well, they would have, really the doctors, what they should do is they should go through legal processes in order to to deal with this article, but my feeling is that they would lose in a court of law, because both are human rights. Life is a human right, and the right to protest is a human right. But at a moment, the judge will have to see which is more important, and definitely the right of life will be over the right of the workers.
What the situation in general does show me, sorry to cut you off, is that it does seem like the central government is working in a bubble, and that they don't value sitting down at the table with anybody who's not part of their team or part of their club. We saw the same thing with the start of the school. I don't know if we talked about this or not on the program, but when the school year started, the government, the day before, 2 days before classes started, said, "Oh, they created basically a scale of discounts for the private schools. That if your tuition is this much, you have this much of a discount." They did it like a day or two before, and what this showed was there was no planning, no coordination, no effort. I don't know if it was the government's fault or if it was the private education sector's fault, that they were never able to come together and sit down and reach an agreement over the summer vacation. And I think you're seeing something similar here, in the case of health. That if it had to come to this, if it came to this extreme, where the public health or the health workers are going on strike, it's because they were never able to sit down together and come to agreements. And when the central government publicly says things like, "If you don't elect officials from our party, we're not going to work with them," then I tend to think it's that the lack of will and good faith is that falls on the government and not on the others. That's the way I look at it.
But you see, I think that it's very important I'm trying to defend the law, and because that's part of my job here.
Yeah.
To look at the legal part.
You're allowed.
The political part, you're absolutely right. Because in the end, what they're trying to do, and this is just my extrapolation, the political extrapolation of thought, is that if they have a social problem with the health workers, they have a solution at hand, which is bringing Cuban doctors to Bolivia. And I because those are manageable. Those don't protest. They don't do anything. They just come here and work. So, and they do political propaganda and everything else. So that's the dangerous part about this. Because I think that in the end, they'll justify bringing those people from Cuba with the argument that, oh no, we cannot reach any agreement with the health people in Bolivia because they're just radicals, because they're from the right, because they represent Camacho, because they represent Carlos Mesa, and this is just a political thing. We cannot work with them. So we're obligated to bring our doctors from Cuba because they don't pose these problems and they earn little money because they're volunteers or whatever. And it's not true. We all know that. Yeah. But I think that's where it's heading. Like, for example, you mentioned, and I think, I was also, I think at some point, I myself am a little bit innocent about things, even after all my life living in Bolivia and in the political sphere of Bolivia. I have heard so many times Lucho Arce and all these people talk about the de facto government. At one point, I was saturated of this, and at one point I thought, and I said, there cannot be people that accept this argument, because this argument is just the way they present it. Arguments can be bad arguments, but if you present them right with the right package, they could be accepted, at least in part. But the way they do this is so aggressive, so blunt, so obnoxious, so abusive. Gobierno de facto. It just sounds like, oh, what are they trying to do? But I finally, I think I discovered what they were trying to do. If you follow the logic that the last government was an illegal and it was a de facto government, then all the actions of the government are illegal. Okay, you're not worried about every one of the actions. They were worried about the judicial actions. So immediately you reach the conclusion that all the proceedings in court were political proceedings, because this was a de facto government, So the de facto government was trying to get me in jail, was trying to get you in jail, and everybody, all our friends were being persecuted because it was a de facto government. We already positioned in the minds of the people that this was a de facto government. In conclusion, ergo, all the proceedings in courts are illegal because they were persecuting us politically. So we approve the law of amnesty of an indult, and I think they were heading towards that because it's perfect. Once people are convinced that this was an illegal government, next step is to say we were all victims of this government and we need an amnesty and we need an indult.
Okay, so
I think that's where it was heading.
We're segueing into the next topic here, which is the amnesty law. I see what you did.
Just like Lucho Arce.
That was an excellent transition. And I hadn't thought about it that way. It drives me insane too.
Because I hadn't thought about it until I read the law. See, and I never read the law because I was so curious about my legal culture. Because I have a friend that lives in the States and has a problem here in Bolivia because one of his relatives is involved in a very complicated legal issue. And this person asked me last night whether this relative of her could get into this amnesty law. So I had to read the law. And when I read the law, it was so clear, because the law is made like a suit, especially for certain kind of people. For example, the law says that you can get amnesty if you are 58 years of age or above. Who is that? That has a name and a last name. Yes.
That's anybody who didn't catch it. Evo Morales is 61.
60. Yeah, that's correct.
60 or 61.
Yeah. No,
they couldn't put his exact age.
Yeah, they did that, and they did it on purpose, and they got everybody sick with this gobierno de facto because they wanted to approve that, and they're getting their way. I think that that is an abusive law, because although it is true, like everywhere in the world, the president has the right to amnesty people, just like in the state. When the president goes away, then they say, oh, this guy's going to be amnesty or indult. The difference between amnesty and indult is a very technical difference, but it's not that great of a deal. Indult is only when you have a sentence that you've been tried and you have been found guilty. Yeah, you have a sentence and you're in jail, then you get an indult because the sentence is broken in parts and it doesn't exist anymore. Amnesty is when you don't have a sentence, when you are being tried for something. And basically it's when you're being tried for something political. So what they do is amnesty it comes from amnesia, from the Greek amnesia. It's forgetting. Yeah, we forget about everything because it was wrong. You were tried for wrong reasons. So amnesty, we're going to forget about that, all that stuff. So they approved this law, and when I read the law, because I had to give it my opinion to this person, it was terrible reading the law, because then you reach the conclusion, those two conclusions. One, this whole thing about the gobierno de facto was aimed to approving the law, because it made perfect logic. Then you had to approve the law if everything was illegal from a golpe de estado. All these trials were illegal. And two, it was made for Evo, especially because it cites the age of the people.
But this amnesty law, to expand on this, also that the controversy, and it's not so much around Evo, at least at this point, right, is that it's protecting, or it seems to target protection for the Masista or the Mas Party sympathists, is that the word? That went out on the streets after Evo Morales resigned, and emphasis on resign, and started burning buses, burning houses, creating all kinds of chaos,
Right.
with extreme violence, putting people's lives at risk. We had a guy in the show, Franco Albarracin, right? Who him and his family, their house was burned down. And I've seen him post things recently that these guys, they're out of jail. I mean, there's video and there's proof that these people burnt their house down and they're out on the streets roaming around. And so anyway, point being that this ley de amnistía, or the amnesty law, is to basically protect everybody who went out and protested and created destruction, or who were extremely destructive, and to keep them from going to jail, right?
Yeah. Well, what the law says is that it's for all the people that were tried in the period between
during the Áñez administration,
19th of October of 2019 to the 20th of October of 2020. All the people that were tried in regarding.
Your microphone is off. Turn your microphone back on. Your microphone.
That's it.
There you go. Now your camera's off.
Oh, wait. What happened here? Oh my God.
Keep talking while you're fiddling with that.
Okay. It's for all the people. And what the law says, it establishes the rules of how you benefit from the law. There are many requirements, and those requirements are not easy to comply either. It's not that easy, you know. But then again, you know, they own they are all the judges nowadays are going to do whatever the Mas wants to do. So basically, the way I picture this whole process is that there's going to be one judge here, and it's Evo. You know, all these judges are going to confront 1,000 petitions, because that's more or less the number of people that are involved. And each one of these guys are going to petition the judge of his case in order to benefit from this law. So the judge is going to see if this guy complies with all the requirements. Requirement number 1, number 2, number 3. But basically, the final decision is going to be political. And I really think, I don't know if about the 1,000 cases, but I think that in the more difficult cases, it's Evo that's going to say, yes, let him benefit from that, or no, don't let him benefit from that. And that's going to be basically a political decision of Evo, him taking into account many of the factors that he takes into account politically in order to let somebody go free or not let somebody go free. Yeah. But that's how I picture this. Evo is going to be the big judge here. I have the law here right now, but yeah, you don't need to look at the whole thing. It's just it's a whole it's a listing of requirements, the law, and one of the requirements was the age, and I laughed about the requirement because it says here, it says it's very funny. It says varones mayores de 58 años.
Varones. Okay.
Ajá. O mujeres mayores de 55 años. That's one of the requirements. So, yeah.
Men over 58 and women over 55.
Over 55, that's correct. Yeah, and that's for amnesty. That's for people that have not been sentenced yet. So these are the people, that's one of the requirements. Persons that have discapacity, that are incapacitated. People that have a chronic sickness, or a terminal sickness, people that women that are expecting a baby. Well, there are many requirements. It's
you have a chronic sickness, you could have type 2 diabetes, and that's
a chronic sickness. Yeah. Well, but basically, what you can see in this law is that there are a couple of important points to make. Why do you need an amnesty law or an indult law for 1,000 people? That just makes no sense. The reason there is amnesty and indult in most countries is because there are cases, it's not for political reasons. There are cases that to the public, they just don't seem right.
Mhm.
You know, this guy is in death row for, I don't know, 15 years, and he's an 85-year-old guy, you know, and the whole process in the legal suit were not too clear. The process took place in Alabama, you know, so come on, you know, you can indulge him. He's an 85-year-old guy. He was accused of such and such. The whole process didn't seem too clear because it took place in Alabama. There's too racial there, and this is a black guy, whatever. And you know, he's old. He cannot talk. He cannot walk.
Mhm. What's the point?
You know? So, yeah, that's the amnesty and the indulge case. You know, basically, you know, it's for humanitarian reasons where there is a good reason to do it. You know, but what they're doing here is nothing humanitarian. It's a political thing. You know, we don't want these guys to be judged. Not even, it's not for people that are sentenced. There are people that are in the process of being judged. Where if it was a legal thing, they should just go. If you trust your judges, why let them free? If you trust the legal system, just let the legal system work.
Do what it's supposed to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and if there are 1,000 guys that are innocent, the legal process will probably determine in all 1,000 cases that they were innocent. But see, they don't trust their own judges. The judges that they put in their places, they don't even trust them. They want Eva to be the judge because that's the only trustable person in this country in order to determine who goes to jail or who goes out of jail. And I think that's the terrible thing about this law. It's basically accepting that in Bolivia, the judicial system, even though it's a Masista system, they don't even trust that. You know, they only trust the criteria of one man, Evo Morales, and he's the big judge. That's the underlying reason of the existence of this law. It's terrible. I don't think there has ever been a law where so many people can be amnestied, and it's terrible. Like I said, amnesties exist all over the world, but it's for humanitarian reasons where it's logical and reasonable to let somebody off the hook. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I can't add anything there. Not that I don't think there's anything you said I don't agree with or question or that's not clear to me, but we're coming up in an hour. There's a couple other topics. I guess we can leave them for the next show if they're still relevant. And I never like to close on. It always seems like we're closing on not such a positive note. Whenever we finish, I always feel sad.
These are the pandemic times. Don't worry. Everybody is like that in the whole world, you know.
Yeah, I guess we can talk about them next time, or in another opportunity. The things, and I don't think there is urgent. But just touching on one of them real quickly, and it seems to go in again. It's part of this politicized judiciary and just turn again like something you touched on, that everything these days is politicized, was the IMF loan.
Oh yeah, that's terrible.
Just touching on it real quickly, the Agnes administration, and again, anything they can do to discredit the Agnes administration, no matter what the cost. I'll never say they were perfect. They made enough mistakes. Plenty. Yep. I wouldn't have voted for her if she, you know, I mean, there's plenty that we can knock them for. Okay. But the bottom line is there was an IMF loan that was what's the word? Facilitated, approved. Thank you. I want to say gestionado, but I can't think of that word in English. For $327 million, basically purpose being to help take care of all the issues coming up with the pandemic. It was approved sometime during administration, during the pandemic, $327 million. The interest rate was low. Basically, the average for international loans is somewhere around 3% interest. This one is approved at 1%. There was a 0.5% commission. No big deal, right?
No big deal, exactly.
And something that probably, felt that could be argued was necessary, or at least at the time they felt was definitely necessary to help, figure out where they can get money to cover all these kinds of costs generated by the crisis, the pandemic crisis. The government, the Arce administration decides they want to return the loan. They don't need a loan from the IMF. And this generated a cost of $24 million based on, basically there's an exchange rate that that is used for wire transfers on international loans or government loans based on the dollar in the international market at the time. And in the course of the past few months, the value in these international, basically the what's the word I'm looking for? The index,
Exchange.
yeah, the exchange rate or the index, the dollar is weakened. And so that upon returning the loan, money is lost. There's also commission and whatever. And it says interest. In Página 7, they said that the interest on this loan, but I don't know. The interest is there whether you return the loan or not over the time that is transpired, right? So,
right,
whatever. I don't know technically what's going on there, but $24 million lost because the Áñez administration approved and accepted this loan from the IMF, and now the Arce administration says we're giving it back. And so they're trying to create another, how do you say juicio de responsabilidades in English?
yeah, and there's no such, there's probably such thing in the States,
There's got to be term, they're a legal,
a legal suit.
A legal suit against Áñez for economic damage, daño económico, economic damage to the state for $24 million because they decided to keep the loan back. It's just that this administration seems to be focusing so much time and energy on the wrong things and things that aren't necessary. Well, I guess from you and your point and my point of view, they aren't necessary. Nobody defends Áñez for so many things that went wrong with their administration, but to leave it in the past and focus on real issues and things that are important just doesn't seem to be a priority these days. And it's extremely unfortunate. It bothers me. But what can we do? We can talk about it here, but it's that's just another example of again, trying to dig up as much dirt, create issues that where they don't exist with the Áñez administration to rewrite the history books and create a narrative. It just isn't necessary, man.
But see, what I think is that it's very interesting because, again, on the surface, it looks like you say, unnecessary. It is unnecessary, not only on the surface, on the depth too. But it's obvious when you look at how can you return $300 million? It doesn't make sense. Whoever gave you that money is a loan, and you're going to repay it. But you don't give back a loan of $300 million, especially when you are not rich. If you have $300 million, use it. And plus, you don't have big guarantees or whatever.
That's the other. They say that Áñez left the central bank empty. There's no money. Right. But you're going to return this. There's no coherence.
You're going to return this money. That's absurd. But again, when you think of the real why they're doing this, my feeling is that apart from having a political campaign saying that, the IMF is the devil and we don't want anything from them. Here's your money, take it, shove it, whatever. But apart from that, which I think, how useful is that for them at this moment? I'm not certain of that. But what is useful for them is to have one more cause to initiate a process against her in order to lock her up.
Yeah.
And what they're very meticulous at these things. You know, they say, okay, we're going to lock her up on the basis of what happened in El Alto the day people were killed there. Sencata, we're going to have another trial on the basis of I don't know what. And now they have a new thing. You know, we're going to have this different suit with regard to this money, with the $300 million that she brought from the IMF because she spent so much money in the exchange rate or whatever. It's just that, you know, they want to make sure to put her in jail sometime in the future, because they don't want anybody opposing Evo Morales at the moment when he decides to go into the ring. That's the only reason. I think.
Yeah, well, I guess the way I'd summarize it is that Evo and the MAS fucked up big time after the 21F, the referendum that he lost, that did not allow him to run, and he insisted. Come October 2019, he avoided a runoff with Carlos Mesa that he would have lost by allegedly committing fraud to avoid that runoff. And it was the chain of events from the 21st of February, that was 2016, right, up through Evo's resignation is just so. It's just so shameless, and he thought he was going to get away with it, and he didn't. And it became exposed on a worldwide level. And Arce's job is cleanup duty.
Right.
That's what it comes down to.
Yes.
His job is to be the janitor and clean up and push it under the rug the best he can. And the way to do that is to embarrar and throw as much mud at Janine Áñez as possible, because that's what's most recent in most people's minds. And
right.
I think that's what it comes down to, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it comes down to him returning to power, Evo. And because they're worried about anybody that comes out as a leader. And I'm pretty sure they're worried about her, because whatever she did wrong, and she did a lot of things wrong, you know, she's still one of the most visible leaders of the opposition. And I think that with time, she may grow, especially if she becomes now the governor of Beni.
Although I don't think she's doing so well.
Yeah, but eventually, if she would become, then she would be a potential leader here for the next elections. So I think that's their plan. And because I even read something or heard something on regards that of Mrs. Coca in El Alto. Now they're looking after her. Now
yes,
they're looking after her.
They want to include. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Eva Copa, just to put everybody up to speed here, who doesn't? Eva Copa was the president of the Senate during the Áñez administration when Adriana Salvatierra resigned. Okay, within the MAS, they didn't allow her to run for governor of El Alto under the MAS for the MAS party, probably in retaliation for her cooperating in allowing Áñez to become president, because that had to be approved by the legislature, correct?
Right.
Okay, so this is basically, that's the way I look at it, and I think that's a pretty safe bet. Now, Eva Copa went out on her own. She went rogue. She broke with the MAS party because she has mass public support in El Alto, which is the sister city de La Paz. And in the polls, she's polling like 70%.
Right.
And the MAS candidate doesn't even hit double digits. He's at like 6 or 7 or 8%. Exactly. And so the MAS should be, and so touching on what you just said is that in this juicio de responsabilidades, this legal suit against Áñez for economic damage to the state, they also are starting to look at, Eva Copa. So I'll turn off your microphone. Actually, I don't do it. But go ahead and cough. There you go. So, yeah, I'm glad you touched on that. So definitely there's, again, besides doing cleanup duty for the disaster that was the end of Evo Morales's grasp on power in Bolivia, they're also trying to secure maybe a future for his return, or at least a survival of the party, because Eva Copa is a tremendous force. and she's just getting started, it seems. So anyway, I
I'm
think that's
worried
a
about
better,
her.
that's a better place to end it.
Yeah. Well, it was good. I
Yeah, it was.
enjoyed it. Yeah, very enriching.
All right.
Well-
Well, thanks everybody who's watching right now and following us, and thank you, Ernesto.
Thank you, Paul.
Take care of your allergies. Try to rest.
Yep, here I am trying to survive. At least it's not COVID. I'm just allergic to many things here.
Silver lining.
Yeah, yep. Next week we should see each other, and I hope we have a good program next week because we're trying to build up something.
Mhm.
for our-
Looking forward to
our
it.
listeners. Yep.
Take
Okay.
care. Have a good weekend.
Take it easy. You too. Enjoy it. Bye bye. Thanks.
Bye bye.